In the morning session, we looked at some of the fundamental basic things of academic writing. In that I was pointing out in an academic writing there is a structure, beginning, middle and end. So that way whatever you are writing will be better organized. So that was one aspect. The second aspect was something equally or even more important, logical structure or the reasoning when you present an argument. So in an academic writing, basic character is that we are presenting arguments in order to prove or establish our point. Okay. So now what are the arguments? How are we going to present an argument was much of the discussion we did in the morning. Argument is something you present in order to prove your point or disprove the other person's point. Or in other words, argument is reasons, giving reasons. Now, whenever you say something, whatever you say, in order to support that, you have to have certain reasons, right? So now those reasons are the most important thing in academic writing. Now, if your reasons are not good, then your writing is ultimately not good. And then if your reasons are very good, then of course your writing is good. Also, writing is convincing. Now, convincing is your reader is something very important. You know, you write something in order to convince, in order to say that this is very important. Or you criticize somebody else's view, then you say that this view is wrong for the following reasons. So you give the reasons. So this reasoning is a very important aspect. Reasoning we do by way of presenting arguments, and arguments can be formal in the sense like what I showed, all human beings are mortal, Socrates is human, therefore Socrates is mortal. But in academic writing, actually based on such formal reasoning, what we are doing is we are using reasoning informally, not really in the form of a two premises and conclusion, that format. Rather than we describe in detail what we want to, our reasoning. So in an informal type of argument is the more important thing in your case, okay? So in other words, in order to prove your point, you have to give the reasons. So it is basically not something very new from what we are doing in our day-to-day life. Even in anything we do in our day-to-day life, we give reasons. Somebody is trying to go out in the rain, we say don't go. And then we give reasons why you should not go. Like that. So think in that light, in that manner. So academically what you say, you support. So for that, we use arguments, formal type of arguments, informal types of arguments. And then I showed from the discourses. In the discourses, there is a structure in the Buddha's discourses. And also in the discourses, Buddha uses, some type of logical reasoning. And then in many places you can see that kind of logical reasoning given. Of course, Buddha will not say that it is logic or something, but simply any intellectual conversation, you give reasoning. Okay, and when you read the Buddhist literature, you can see many type of such reasoning given. I will give you one example. I think you should know about the story of a slave girl called Punna. Now this Punna is a slave girl. She happens to be a follower of the Buddha. Now one day when she went to, of course, as a slave woman, early morning, she has to go to the river, bring water. Now she went to the river, Ganges river, to bring water, and then she saw this Brahmin early morning dipping in the cold water. Then this woman asked from the Brahmin, well, I am a slave woman, that is why I have to come early morning to take water, which is not a very easy thing in a cold climate. Then she says, okay, but I have to do that because I am a slave woman, Dasi. But you are a Brahmin, why do you have to come in the early morning and dip in the water, in the cold water like this? Not very easy thing. Then Brahmin says that by doing so, he will be born in the heaven. Now then, the Punna Dasi's remark is, if you go to heaven by submerging or dipping yourself in Ganges water, what about all the fish and tortoise and all the, fish live in this water? Will they be going to heaven? Because if you just dip in the water, you go to heaven. There is fish and all these things that live in water all the time, Ganges water. Now that's all what she says. Now actually if you analyze this story, there is argument. There is an argument, there is something she says. She just asks a question. If you go to heaven by dipping in the water or taking bath in the Ganges water, what about the fish and tortoise living in the water? So they should also be going to heaven. Actually the argument behind this, what she wants to say is, if you go to heaven by taking bath in the Ganges water, those the fish and these beings who live in that water should be necessarily going to heaven. But we can think that they are not going to heaven. If they are not going to heaven, how can you go to heaven? Simply by taking bath in the river. So it's only one sentence, but it doesn't happen. So there you can see an argument. Okay. Now this is what is called you are presenting an argument. Now if you want, we can write this as a form of argument, something like this. If by taking bath in, we say Ganga, people go to heaven, then all fish living in Ganga must go to heaven. This is what Punna Dasi says. But if you analyze this, what it means is fish in Ganga do not go to heaven. Okay, the conclusion is, we say, therefore, what is the conclusion? Our conclusion is, by taking bath in Ganga, we can say nobody go to heaven. Right? So this is our conclusion. But this conclusion was not stated by Punna. What she just said is only this. If taking by bath in Ganges, if you go to heaven, then all the fish in the river should go to heaven. But we know that, if all the fish and all the other creatures living in Ganges water go to heaven, that's ridiculous, right? That can't be. So, in other words, you show that if what you say is correct, then it leads to some kind of unbelievable consequence. Now, Brahmin says that he will be born in heaven if he get a bath in the Ganges. But if that is true, then it will have a consequence that will lead to ridiculous thing. Because if that is true, then what about all the other beings who are born and live in that water? All of those people should be going into heaven too, but it doesn't happen that way. Now, what I want to show here you is, you can see a argument there. Okay. Now, this is the meaning of argument. So, Brahmin says something, then Punna says something else to cut it off. Understand? So, what Punna says is, she is really presenting her own argument. So, when the Brahmin says that he will go to heaven by taking bath in the Ganges, Punna says no. But of course, the way she says no is, she puts a counter, what we call counter claim. If it is true, then look what will happen. Okay, then the argument goes like, okay, if you take bath in the river, if you go to heaven, then all the fish should go. But we know that fish will not go to heaven. So the conclusion is, therefore, you will also not go to heaven. Right? So that's the thing. Now you can see that what she said is what she gave is argument. But if Punnadasi says, oh, I don't like it or something, then that is not a reasoning. Okay, reasoning means something that rational, that you can accept. It's not something like your personal view or something. Now here you can see that she says, if what you say is true, then the something incredible will happen. All the fish will go to heaven. But it can't be simply. So therefore what you say is not valid. So this is type of the giving reasons. Now here you can see the reasoning given. So if you accept this reasoning, you can see that what the Brahmin said is meaningless. So in that manner, you must give reasons when you say something. Okay, that is something very important in the academic writing. So these are the basically things what we. Oh gosh, what happened that did in the morning. So we looked at the structure, and then looked at the significance of introduction and conclusion. I also connected that to what is in the Dhamma, Adi Kalyana, Majjhe Kalyana, Pariyosana Kalyana, the good at the beginning, middle and end. Okay. Now we will look at the presentation of the content. Now I said that in an argument, in academic writing, there is, there are three sections: introduction, the beginning, and then the middle, and also the conclusion. Now, if you take the middle part is the most important thing. So we take something like this, and then we have conclusion. And then we have introduction, and then we have here the basic text. Now in here, when you write this section, what are the methods you should follow? What are the conventions you should follow? What are the techniques you can make use of? So here you have the content here, okay? Now in this here you have really the content. Now the important thing is how to present this context. So presentation of the content, how to present it. You write an paper, article, or your examination or whatever, and then how to present that. Now we will look at some of these aspects. The presentation of the content. Now basically we have sentences, but when we are talking about an essay, we are talking about paragraphs and sections, how to break paragraphs and how to divide the paper into sections. Now you know this part is something very important. How do we divide sections? Like, you know, if you write something several pages, you know, you can't go on like this, you know, you can't go on like this. But then what we do is usually, you know, we have something like this, and then again we have something like this. You know, we have in this manner paragraphs, okay? But each paragraph is with a set of sentence. However, this is a very basic thing we do is we separate paragraphs. Now, how do you do that? How do you separate the paragraph? What is the method of doing it? Is there any criterion to do it? Now, of course, rather than writing like in like a mat, you know, you separate into paragraphs. But how do you separate paragraphs? What is the reason of having a paragraph? It's not only for the easiness of seeing it. Of course, when you separate the paragraph, paragraph is basically based on one idea. If you can develop one idea, that can make a paragraph. But basically what we are talking as paragraphs is something like it, depending on, of course, there is no hard and fast rule, but many occasions, writers, you know, the beginning writers, they don't know the reason of paragraph. So, you know, they just whatever they break the paragraphs, you know, whenever they think. No, actually the paragraph has to have a reason. That reason is a paragraph you separate or identify, you make one paragraph based on one idea, okay? So that is basically the purpose. So it's not only for the sake of, you know, the convenience of looking at it. So even for understanding, it is very important that you have different paragraphs. So each paragraph, when you see, you can see that each paragraph has a certain uniformity of the ideas. And then when you move from this paragraph to next paragraph, there must be a connection, continuity. So uniformity of the ideas and then also continuity. So from first paragraph to the second, second to the third, you can see gradually it moves from in a logical sequence, okay? So now if you take a book, you can see books have usually chapters. So you have the heading, and then you have introductory chapter, and then other chapter, and then concluding chapter, okay? Now that's a big book, okay? But if you take a paper like couple of pages, maybe 7, 8, 10 more pages, then within a paper you can have, okay, we start with sentences, and then we have paragraphs, and then we have sections or parts. So this is what you get in a paper: sentences, paragraph, and sections. Now this is when you are writing a paper. Of course, if you are writing a book, then we have, in a book we have chapters, okay? But within the chapter, you have these three things. Within the chapter, you have these things. You have, of course, sentences, paras and sections. So you can have within the chapter these things, okay? But then in a book there are several chapters like this. Actually in a paper, your paragraph and your sections. So a section can have, depending on, I mean there are no rules for this. And now in a short paper, you don't even need to have sections. You can just have interconnected paragraphs. But usually in a book, as you have chapters, in a paper you have to have paragraphs, and if you don't make sections, then what you can do is, you can have, now the paper has a title. We can say paper has a title, and within the title, within the paper you have actually not subtitle, but we can say sub-themes. Okay, so sub-themes. So your sections can be connected to sub-themes. In other words, in your paper, if you are discussing several things, each thing can have a sub-theme. So within a chapter, you have themes. I mean, of course, there is a theme for the whole paper, and then for that paper, main theme, there can be sub-themes, okay? So this is basically, and within a sub-theme, there can be several paragraphs. So you have the title of the paper, and then you have sub-themes for the paper, and within sub-themes, you can have a certain number of paragraphs. Now easy, if you take a subject like, okay, you are writing something like Buddhist karma theory. You write a paper on, for example, we think that you are writing something on Buddhist, we say karma theory. Now this is the title of your paper, okay? So then you will be starting with the introduction, and then you go to the now when you are really within this section content, maybe you can have sub-themes like, your one sub-theme can be history of karma theory. And this is one theme. So within that you can have, number of, the paragraphs. So this is one, we will say something like this, and then we will have types of karma, and then within that also you have several things, and then we have karma and result, and within that also you have some chapters, and then we go to the conclusion. So you see here we have introduction, here we have conclusion. So in this section, this is the content, okay? Now this is the content. So you divide it into something like this. Okay. Now here you see, when you have sub-themes divided like that, you can organize your material. Now otherwise what happens is, you discuss things, it becomes really a confusion of things. You put in together so many unrelated things. Now when you subdivide it, history related to karma theory you can only discuss here and then finish that. And then types of karma you can discuss here. And then karma and result, karma and vipaka you can discuss here, okay? And then Of course, you can add if you want any more accepts, you can add those things too. I'm just giving you a rough idea about when you write something. Now you have to have this this is what is called the structure really. When you write something, you have to have a structure. Now, many beginning writers, ask, how do you really write? How do you do that? Actually, the most important thing is first you read and collect material. Now, you can't just write something. You have to read a lot. Read things and think about these things. Then you come to a point when you can make a structure like this, rough structure like this. Now, if you have a rough structure like this, then you can start writing because then it is in your mind. You can really, what you can do is this what we call plan or something, scaffolding. So you make a plan, and then what you need to do is just to develop this. When you develop these 3 sections, you have your paper. And then you can add your introduction and add your conclusion, and then the paper is complete. Okay. But then depending on the subject you are going to discuss, your sub-themes can be different. Say for example, we are writing on 4 Noble Truths, then we start with the introduction, then we can simply go to the first, second, third, fourth Noble Truth, and then we can conclude. Okay. Now, within the first one, okay, you write about the first Noble Truth, that within that sub-theme, you can have sub-themes, like, within the Dukkha Satya, you can have different sections, okay. And then Samudaya Satya also you can have different sections. Now there, the structure is pretty clear. But in some other cases, sometimes the structure may be not very clear. Then you have to think of, how to present this case in a logically consistent order. So usually we start with, something if you need historical beginning, and then, or we start with the definition of that word, whatever. Say we are discussing Paticcasamuppada, you can start with the definition of the concept, okay, and then you can go into the general descriptions. So making this plan is very important, okay. Now making the plan depends on, how well you have read about, your particular thing. So paragraphs, sections mean this. So basically you make a structure, fairly clear structure for your writing. So breaking paragraphs, how to divide the paper into sections. Now, there are no hard and fast rules, but depending on what you are doing, you have to make different sections. But when you look at the structure, you must be able to see some kind of logically consistent flow of what you are saying. Okay. Now that is very important. So that you have you present it in proper manner. And then I will be discussing few things. In fact, these things are whenever you are writing an academic paper, okay, academic writing. This is usually we don't use endnotes or footnotes when we are writing examination. In the examination hall, we are not doing that. But these things are basically meant for academic writing. Suppose you are writing a paper, okay, then what should you do? Okay, now this is basically the structure and the content. Now when you have this, today we are using some other tools in order to make our writing clearer and transparent. Now one way we are doing is we are using endnotes and footnotes. Why do we do these things? Why do we use endnotes and footnotes? For what purpose? When you read academic writings, you see very often people use endnotes or say footnotes. In fact, endnotes and footnotes today with computer is much easy. But usually, if you have, this is your paper, one page. In this page, you can have, this is what is called footnotes. Okay, bottom of the paper. Or suppose you have endnote means you have so many pages, and in the last page you have what is called endnotes. So the footnotes or endnotes. Now notes are basically you give reference to what you say. So that is one reason why you use notes. Now you are quoting from some discourse. Okay, as a footnote you can say which discourse, whether it is which Nikaya, Sanyutta, Anguttara, Digha Nikaya, which section, and also edition, Chatta Sanghayana. If you take it from CD-ROM, then you can refer to the CD-ROM, whatever, printed book or electronic media, you can give the reference. Okay, this is where I took that. Why do we have to do that? Why do we have to do that? One reason why do we have to do that is when you say that this statement is from this sutta, your reader can also check that if the reader wants. And also, your writing becomes reliable because you say, I quote this from this sutta. If that is true, then what you say becomes more substantial, more stable, and also it becomes valid, right? You can't just say the Buddha said this. Then the question comes, where did the Buddha say that? You have to say that, okay? But today, when we try to give the reference, what is called reference, the details, you can't put those things inside the paper. Like you have the paper here, content, you don't give all the details here. Either you put that below the paper, bottom of the same paper, or you go to the very end of the thing. Now, today most of you are using computers, so not like those days when we were typing. Because when we were typing by hand, you have to really carefully plan how much space you want for the footnotes. But today a computer will do that automatically, so you don't have to worry about it. If you want endnote, you just give the endnote command. If you want footnote, you just give the footnote command, it doesn't matter. But some people prefer endnotes, some people prefer footnotes. Basically no different. Those people prefer footnote, they say that if you have it in the same page, then you can just, when you are reading, you just look at the below and then you know where the reference is. But if you have it at the end of the paper, then you have to turn all the pages, or in the computer you have to go to the end of the document to see the endnotes. Yeah. But people who prefer endnotes, they say that when you have extra unnecessary, not very necessary things in the bottom of the page, your mind is distracted. So you better have them as endnotes. So if somebody needs to know the reference, then that person can go to the endnotes. But otherwise you can simply skip that, forget about it. But anyhow, basically we are using endnotes and footnotes. Now, what do you indicate as endnote or footnote? A reference. A reference means basically where you got the information. Okay, reference is where you got the information. Now, this is very important in the academic writing because whenever you say something, you must be responsible for it. Okay, I mean, if you write something academically and if you publish it, other people also refer to it. So if you did the wrong thing, if your information is not there, those people who read your article, also those readers will also get misled. You do something wrong, you do a mistake, if there is an error, many people will be wrong accordingly. So therefore it is very important. Now that is why we say, we give the reference. We say we got this from this book. We say this is there. So that way, you are providing support to what you say. If I say I got this from the Sutta Pitaka, you have to say where you got that. Vinaya Pitaka, you have to say where you get that. That way, the reader can also go to Vinaya Pitaka and check whether it is there, whether it means the same thing there. So today we are being very, academically very honest, and then other person also doesn't want to accept simply because we say something. Other person also want to check for himself or herself. So for that purpose, what we do is we give reference. So we give reference in a footnote or endnote. I will come to how to give reference a little bit later. But here, and some information that is not as important as to include in the main body of the paper, but nevertheless relevant. So sometimes you may give a footnote or endnote to give some additional information. But that information is not very relevant to put inside the document in here, in the content, but of course you can put that as a endnote or footnote. Or you can give some additional information. For that also we are using endnotes and footnotes. Okay. So basically in academic writing we are using endnotes and footnotes. But remember, it is not a rule that you have to have endnotes or footnotes. Okay. If you don't have anything to refer to, say you don't have to. But usually when you do academic writing, we have some references to give, because we always develop on other people. We say that so and so said this, and then we have to give the name of the book and the author and these things. So usually you have references. But sometimes, the beginning academic writers, they think that more you have footnotes, better or something. It is not like that. If you don't want to have so many footnotes, don't put so many footnotes. Having a lot of footnotes doesn't mean that you are more academic than others. Okay, you can simply have whatever that you need. So whatever the number of footnotes or endnotes that you need. So by having more, you are not saying that you are a more academic person. So endnote or footnote thing is important in that sense. Now, what you can do is, when you read academic papers now, from today, you can look at how the authors have used endnotes and footnotes, okay? But sometimes they may have used it in the wrong manner. So don't follow them, but just to understand how people have used them. Now if it is a good scholarly work, then you can always get the example, how to put endnotes or footnotes from the book. I really don't know much about the Burmese text, Burmese secondary resources. But if you take any book, English book, published by recognized university publication like Harvard University Press, Chicago University Press, Princeton University Press, Oxford, Cambridge University Press, actually books are, because they don't publish books without proper endnotes, footnotes and other things, okay. So maybe in Burmese language also I'm sure you have such books, but when you look at read text published by those recognized publishers, particularly recognized university publishers, then you can see how you can use endnotes and footnotes, okay. So particularly book published by Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press, Chicago University Press, I mean, those are the things that you should use as examples to know how it is to be done. Okay, that is about endnotes and footnotes. And then we will move on to quotation. Now in academic writings, you quote sections from maybe from the discourses, maybe from the commentaries, okay? And then maybe you quote from secondary sources, okay? Now why do we have to quote? To indicate that the particular statement, information, fact belongs to someone else and not to claim undue or undeserved for credit. Now one thing why we quote is actually, now when we are doing academic writing, we are really dealing with ideas, information. Now very often this information belong to others. They are the people who have discovered them. So by quoting, what we are doing is actually when you quote something, you mention the reference and then indicate the particular statement or information or fact doesn't belong to you, it belongs to somebody else. So in other words, you give the credit to that person, okay, by quoting. That's something we do. Give the credit or blame to whom is due. That means if it is wrong, if you quote it, then of course you are not responsible for it because you are quoting it from somebody. If it is right, again you are not responsible. The responsibility or the credit will go to somebody else. Blame or the credit, either way, it should go to the person who really owns it. To recognize an author, also if you quote from somebody, you are giving a recognition. Now you are writing something on Buddhism, you are quoting from the discourses. Why? Because you recognize the discourses as the main authority. So in order to support your statement, you quote from the discourse. Now when you quote from the discourse, what you do is you give credibility to what you say from quoting. So you recognize the author and also you give. To preserve the intellectual honesty and integrity. Okay, now that means if you are quoting from somebody, if it doesn't belong to you, then you honestly say that it is not mine, it is somebody else's. Okay, so in other words, people steal things also. Now particularly today, I think you know what we call cut and paste. Many people do this. So many people do it, you take some portions from somewhere and paste and you make a document. Actually, about plagiarism I will be talking about a little later, because now today there are a lot of mechanism to catch whether you are doing that sort of the misbehaving. To enhance the credibility of what you say, to indicate that you have seen and consulted the original author's work. Now this last one is also very important, okay. Now you quote from somebody, say for example, you quote from Majjhima Nikaya. You say this is in the Majjhima Nikaya. However, you have not seen that in the Majjhima Nikaya, you saw it in somebody else's book. But what you do is, you don't mention that somebody else's book, you say this is in Majjhima Nikaya. But the problem is this, if that somebody else was wrong, then you are also wrong. Actually, even if you saw that somebody else is quoting from Majjhima Nikaya, he says that this is in Majjhima Nikaya, this sutta, then you must check yourself in the Majjhima Nikaya. And then if you see that, okay, it is true, then you can say that, yes, it is from Majjhima Nikaya. Then you don't have to refer to the other person. But simply, if you say something is from Majjhima Nikaya without yourself seeing it, do you understand what I am saying? So when you put a reference, okay, this is from this book, you must have seen that. That is honesty. If you have not seen it, then you can say that according to so and so, it is here. Then of course, you are giving the responsibility to that person. So if it is true, then of course credit goes to him. If it is false, also blame goes to that person. You are also safe. So, but very often people do this. They don't read the original. They just read something. And then what you see in the secondary source, you put as what you see. So in your article, in your paper, you say, okay, this comes in the Majjhima Nikaya. But you see that you have never seen it in the Majjhima Nikaya. You have never seen it in the Anguttara Nikaya. So without yourself seeing that, don't put that. So actually the indicate that you have seen and consulted the original author's work is something very, very important when you refer to something. So the quotation is something very important for many reasons in academic writing. Associated with this, there are certain technical points. Now, how not to quote? Quoting out of context. Quoting to give a wrong, unintended impression by the original author, or quoting to show off. Quoting something that you have not seen, that you have not read, that you have not consulted, or means quoting from the secondary source. Quoting too much, poor style and intellectually compromising. Quoting without properly connecting the quoted passage to the content of your paper, both above and below. Now look at the very last two things. Quoting too much. Sometimes in academic writing, some people quote pages. Then of course, pages you quote, it is not your writing. You are quoting from somebody else. Now that's very weak. Actually what you need to do is, you can read other person's paper and summarize. Say those things in your word, but without doing that, you just quote it. I mean, it is very easy. It's like that cut and paste thing. You quote several. So you never quote several pages, okay? You never quote several pages. Now if you are quoting more than one paragraph, maximum you can quote one paragraph. But if you are quoting more than one paragraph, you have to say why you are quoting more than one paragraph. You can't simply quote 2, 3, 4 paragraphs like that, no. There must be a very special reason for you to quote more than one paragraph, okay? Just one paragraph is okay. So quoting too much is style-wise, it is a poor style. And also intellectually compromising means, it is not your intellectual work. That work belongs to somebody else, okay? So you can't quote pages like that. I have seen some I have seen some books, people quoting, like so many pages like that. So that is not a good practice. And then quoting without properly connecting the quoted passage to the content of your paper, both above and below. Now, sometimes we quote a paragraph or passage or few sentences. We don't connect it to the above or below. But that's again a poor quoting. Now, before you quote something, you have to say, I am going to quote from this in order to show this point or something. And then you quote, and again, in the next paragraph, you say, you connect it, what was in the quotation. Okay? So, I mean, you can't just leave a quotation without, indicating about it and also without discussing it. Sometimes you can quote a passage and you can discuss, okay, in this passage, there are these things and, so on and so forth, okay? So like that, quoting without connecting is, something again not proper. So this is how not to quote. And then technical aspects. Quoting words, phrases, sentences and paragraph. Use of quotation marks, inverted commas for words, phrases and sentences. Using indent for paragraphs without quotation marks. Now, when you are quoting something, How do you quote that? Now basically when you are quoting a word, phrase or sentence, what we do is we use this. Now when you use this, these are called inverted comma. Now when we use inverted comma for a word, we indicate that that word doesn't belong to you. You are using somebody else's word. So you use inverted comma. Or you can quote a phrase like that. Or you can quote a complete sentence like that, okay? So you are quoting, now suppose your writing is like this. It goes like this. Okay, now from here, you may have something like this. So up to here, the quoted thing. So you indicate like that. Or you may be having just one word. So, something like that. Now this is how you quote a word, sentence or a phrase. Now within the same structure, within the same paragraph, okay. However, if you are quoting more than one sentence, okay, I mean there is no really again rule, but if you are quoting more than one sentence, then what you do is, again computer will do the job for you, we call indent. So what we do is something like this. Now here, maybe this is a paragraph and this is another paragraph. Within that you have quoted passage. Now here what we have done is indent. Usually you leave 3 spaces or sometimes 5 spaces and then you indent to the right. Okay, usually to the left when you are using computer is automatically indented this way. So you leave 3 or 5 or whatever number of space you like, basically 3 or 5, then this is the quotation. Now in this kind of quotation with the indent, you don't put inverted commas, okay? For these things you don't put inverted commas. Like here, if it is within a paragraph, you put inverted commas. Here you don't put inverted commas, okay? You simply quote this passage. You simply quote this passage. So this is how to do that. But today again, because most of you are nobody is using hand typewriters. But if you are doing handwriting, then follow this method. So if you are quoting a sentence or phrase or word, then you use inverted commas. Otherwise, you do what is called indent that particular thing. So that's how you do that. So the quotation is something, quoting is something very important in academic writing. In order to prove you are quoting from original source and you have seen that and sort of thing. And how not to quote? Quoting out of context. Quoting to give a wrong, unintended impression by the original author. Quoting something that you have not seen. Now I am not going to go into details of those things, but sometimes people quote from others in order to prove their point. Actually that quotation has nothing to do with that. So in a wrong manner. So in other words, when you quote it, you must really make sure that that quotation gives the meaning that original author intended, okay? Not something that original author did not intend. So basically quotation, and then this is how to use quotations in your writing, and the quoted word, phrase, etc., how to be exactly the same way as they were in the original, even if they were grammatically not correct or incorrect information. Now important thing is when you quote somebody's sentence, suppose that sentence has a grammatical mistake, you can't correct it, okay? Because if you are quoting, you have to quote the sentence as it is. Maybe there is a printing mistake, maybe there is a grammatical mistake, but you cannot correct it. But if you want to indicate that this incorrect word is not yours. Because reader can think you did not, type it correctly. So you can put within brackets, within brackets you can say this is original, the thing. I mean, like even in the minor thing, I mean not minor, but sometimes people use bold, or sometimes people use italics. Now if you are quoting with bold or italics or underline, you have to say within brackets, quote bold is original, italics is original, underline is original. That means in the original quoted paper these things are there. In a quoted passage, you can't put indent, you can't put bold, you can't put italics, so you can't put underline the way you want. In other words, when you are quoting a text, that text has to be exactly the same. You can't change the capital symbol, you can't change like underlining or bold or italics, you can't do anything. If there is a mistake, you can indicate that. Now, in order to indicate that a word is wrong or you do not approve of it, usually the Latin word sic, meaning so or thus, in italics is used in square brackets, sic. But this is only if you are writing in English. But I don't know if you are writing in your own language, then of course there must be a way to indicate that. But in English, if you find this sic, usually you find this inside quotation, that means the person who is quoting doesn't approve it. For example, if there is a grammatical mistake, you don't correct it, but there you can put SIC, indicating that it is not your mistake. Because the reader may not know whether original was the mistake or whether you made the mistake when you are quoting. Okay? So in order to indicate that this is original, this is found in the original writing, what you do is you just mention sic. Okay? So, so remember, you have to be exactly the same way as they were in the original, even if they were grammatically not correct or incorrect information, even the information is incorrect, you can't correct it. In other words, a quoted passage you can't change. You can't change the information, you can't change the grammar, you can change the printing conventions like italics or underline or bold or something. You can't do any of those things. A spelling mistake may be corrected, but in English, American and English spelling cannot be changed according to your preference. Now again, that is problematic. In English literature, American English and English are different. Now some people use Indian English. Now there are many different versions. So even correcting an English sentence, grammatical mistake, the spelling mistakes is a minor thing. Maybe that is corrected, but even then, you can't change it in the words. There is a difference between American and English usage. If you say splendor, harbor, they don't have you. So you can't put you, because the original author was following the American system of spelling. Yeah. So you can't change it as you want. So that is something remember in mind. But when you are writing in Burmese, maybe small spelling mistakes you can correct it, because there can be like in many printed books, like in small printing shops, there can be many mistakes. So you have to, maybe some of these things you can correct. But basically quotation is something very important. So these things are important when we think about how to quote. So remember, basically as a rule, when you quote, you cannot change anything, okay? You simply quote it. Now we come to the plagiarism. Plagiarism is what I mentioned earlier. Another word for plagiarism is cut and paste. Okay, so many people go to computer, they take chunks from different things, they put as if you. So ideas, concepts, views, words, phrases or sentences, or pictures, maps, charts, graphs, etc. All these can be plagiarized, or even whole works are plagiarized. Plagiarism means taking something that belongs to others, taking something that is not yours, okay? That is plagiarism. So when you cut and paste, it doesn't belong to you, okay? Now you can get other people's even words. Sometimes that can be actually more easy name is plagiarism means stealing. Okay, plagiarism means stealing. So stealing is not only money, you can steal other people's ideas, other people's words and everything. So ideas, concepts, views, words, phrases, sentences, pictures, maps, charts, graphs, anything. Honesty and truthfulness are very important values in academic discipline. Honesty and truthfulness, you have to be very honest, you have to be very truthful. If something is not yours, you have to say that it is not yours. If you present it as yours, it is a stealing. It is stealing. So Buddhist monks and nuns have to be very careful about stealing, right? Because stealing. So, but stealing ideas, stealing information is also stealing. How to make use of the existing knowledge without being guilty of plagiarism? We have to use existing knowledge. There is no need to reinvent the wheel. General and common knowledge is common property of all. For specific knowledge, we have to give credit. Now, what it means is this. Now, general knowledge, is general knowledge. So, anybody can give that knowledge. You don't have to say, I took it from so and so. Now, for example, if you talk about Four Noble Truths, don't worry about plagiarism. If you look at the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, if you use your Buddhist knowledge, you are writing about Four Noble Truths. Everybody knows it. The material is there. Okay. But if there is a very specific thing, some important thing, then that you have to give credit. That means, you have to say, I took this from so and so. Otherwise, because, in other words, in academic writing, you can't really give credit to everything because, there is a lot of general knowledge. So we are using general knowledge, but only thing is, if something is very specific thing, then only for that we have to give credit or we have to give the reference. Now, earlier we discussed how to put the reference, endnotes and footnotes and the reference. Now, this has something to do with that. So we have to use the existing knowledge. There is no need to reinvent the wheel. Now, there is no need to reinvent the wheel means actually I am using some popular phrase. Reinventing the wheel means you inventing something is already there. If something is already there, you don't have to redo it. You better make use of it. That's what it means. So the existing knowledge you can use without acknowledging. You don't have to make acknowledgement. But if anything is specific, then such knowledge you have to okay, so basically you can use general and common knowledge. Now, plagiarism, because of the electronic use quite common in the world. Now, as a result, in many universities, when you give a paper, term paper, that term paper is given through the electronic media. So there is a program on plagiarism. You have to run that program on your document. So if your document is plagiarized one, that program can catch. Okay? But I don't know whether such program is available for Burmese, so don't worry. But for English, when you are writing, there are programs like that. I remember I was teaching in New Zealand, Otago University. They had this policy. So every term paper, every paper student give, they have to run through that plagiarism program. So, by style of writing and, other things, they can decide who the author, how many authors are there. So, if you are quoting something without giving the reference, they can know it. Okay? So you have to really run that program in order to, be able to present your paper. Otherwise, your paper is not accepted. Okay, but every country in the world is not like that. But on the other hand, we need to be very careful about it, how to use the existing knowledge and also how to use the special type of knowledge for our purposes. Okay, so these are some of the important things when we are doing academic writing. Let me move on to few more technical points. Now, for example, inverted single comma, inverted double comma, bracket, round brackets, and square brackets, and so on. Inverted single comma is used to indicate a word or a phrase, not its meaning. For example, if I say man has 3 letters, I am not talking about man. I am talking about the word man. Okay. Now, if you just now I said, if you put this between the word, that means is a quotation. But if you do like this, just one comma, inverted comma and a word, then that means you are indicating that you are referring to the word, not the thing. For example, if you say man, if you say man, now the difference is here we are talking about man, but here we are talking about the word man. So that's why I say that we can say man has 3 letters. Man has 3 letters means we are talking about the word man. Okay. So inverted single comma, inverted double comma. Inverted double comma is to indicate a quoted word, clause or sentence. Now that is for inverted double comma. Round brackets, which also called parentheses, to indicate an extra word, clause or a sentence within a sentence as a parenthesis. So parenthesis is now usually for Buddhist writings. When you are writing something in Myanmar, you want to put a Pali word. So you put the Pali word within parentheses, we say within brackets usually. So you put Pali word within parentheses. That is round. The square brackets to indicate information not properly belong to the sentence or quotation. Now there is a difference between this and this. If you look at carefully, for example, now if you use this, this is parentheses. Say you say something in Burmese, relevant Pali word you can put here. However, if you put like this, this means you are putting some additional information which is not belong to the sentence. Okay, additional information. Now, so there is a difference between parentheses and also square brackets. We call this square brackets. Now, if you have several these things, then what you need to do is we put like this also. Now, if you want to show that this whole thing is one unit, then we use this type of brackets. So this is called square brackets, this is called parentheses, and maybe this has a name or not, I am not sure, but to include larger section of things we use this word, this mark also. Larger square brackets are used to include what is within square brackets. So larger square brackets means this. So parentheses, square brackets, larger square brackets, what I mean by this is this. So you can see when you are using these things, you must use them knowingly, okay? But basically parentheses is the one very often we use. Give some kind of indication, important second word, Pali word, translation, or something, anything that is not directly relevant but important, we put within brackets. Okay, so in academic writing we are using these signs in order to indicate certain important things. And then finally we have tools for academic writing continued. Modern Language Association, MLA, or Chicago method of reference. Now, that we talked about reference. Now, reference is something very important. How do we put reference? Like when we are doing academic writing, how you put reference, how you indicate reference is something very interesting. Now, very often we use the what is called short method inside the document. The short method inside the document is something like this. Okay, we have and then here what you do is we say Smith is the author, we say Smith 1999, we say 2018. Now here what we say is the last name of the author is Smith, his book is 99, page is 280. Okay. Now this you put within the structure, within the paragraph. Then if you want to know who the Smith is, then you go to bibliography. Bibliography means book list, or sometimes we use the word reference. Okay. Now here you go in the bibliography or in the reference list, in the alphabetical order, when you look at, you find Smith. The Smith 99, if you want to know what Smith 99 means, you go to the reference and then you see that. Okay, that is what. But basically we use this. But then you have to have necessarily a reference list or bibliography which shows what Smith 1999 means. Basically we use. So this is the brief method. Smith 99, or we can see P. P means page. But even without P you can put 280, or you can put P 280. Either way it doesn't matter. So this is the short way you can use. And then reference, how are you going to put? There are usually in English writing there are two ways. One way is what we call Chicago method or MLA method. They are author's last name, author's first name and initials or middle name, title of the book, additional information, place of publication, publisher, date. Okay, this is one way to put that. We say something like this. Okay, we say Smith, and then of course I think I have example the other side rather than writing. Now example, Alan Thomas B, Vanishing Wildlife, Washington DC, National Geographic Society, 1974. Now what it means is we are giving the reference to a book by Alan. Alan Thomas B. Alan is the last name, okay? Thomas B is second name and first name and middle name. Now real name is Thomas B. Allens, but when we give the reference we say Alan, that is the last name first, and then first name and the middle name. And then the name of the book, Vanishing Wildlife. When you give the name of a book in bibliography, you always make it italics, okay? Name of the book is always in italics. And then you have the Washington DC, that is the place of the publication. National Geographic Society is the publisher, 1974 is the year. So this is the one method, this is one method. For bibliography, page numbers are not given. For reference, page numbers may be given at the end. For example, page 234. PP, if there are many pages, 234, 254. Please note how comma, period and colon has been used. Colon has been used in the example. For reference, the year may be given after the author's name. Okay, so when you give the bibliography, you look at Alan, last name, then comma, then Thomas B, again dot, Vanishing Wildlife dot, Washington DC, then semicolon, after semicolon National Geographic Society, comma, 1974, then again dot or full stop. Okay, that is basically the one way of doing that. For note, Alan Thomas B, Vanishing Wildlife, you know, again. You know, this basically this method you follow, but there are two methods. I will show you there are one more method. The other method is the Harvard method. Then Harvard method is again people use very much. Notes are usually used in humanities studies. Author date method within the body of the writing is used social and natural sciences, but you can use this. There is no problem about it. Shorten notes, Smith, saving time, 320. Author date method, Smith, 2016, Smith and Fisher, 2016. I mean, all these things are the same. Smith, comma, saving time is the name of the book, 320. This one way to do that. Here what Smith, we gave the year, and then like in the second one, Smith, 2016, page 315 to 316. Now, you know, these are, and then we will do to American Philosophical Association no method of Harvard method. Now, this Harvard method is the one used by a lot of students, and you know the scholars use this. Now, look at this one. First author's name, the last name first and middle name, year, title of the book in italics, additional information, series, title, volume, etc., publisher, pairs of publication. Okay, now if you look at this example, now look at this, Alan B. Thomas. Now there, usually what we do is, we have the year of the publication right after the author's name. So Alan Thomas B, 1974. Vanishing Wildlife, there the difference is publisher comes first, National Geographic Society, Washington DC. Okay. Now, for example, if you want to mention something, the printing press and Yangon. So, according to this method, Yangon comes first. I'm sorry, the printing press comes first and Yangon comes last. Okay. So, the place of publication you put last. These are the two different methods. But what you can do is actually you follow one method, whatever, systematically. In the matters of style, many authors seem to have created their own methods along the lines of these methods. What is important is to be consistent in whatever method you follow. Actually, use one method consistently. That is the most important thing. So if you follow Chicago method, you follow the Chicago method. But usually, in my writings, I follow this method. But again, so you have the author and then author's year. When you say Alan Thomas B, 1974, you go to the bibliography or reference list to see what is the 1974 book's name. And in the brief note like this, you can have Smith, 1999, page 280. So you go to so in other words, within the document itself, you can give the short reference. And then, if you want to know more detail, then you go to the bibliography or the end. In journal articles or chapter of a book or article, chapter is given in inverted commas. Now look at this. Jones, Diwan, Thomas, like the rhinoceros or like the horn, the problem of Kaggavisana Sutta visited, but you have it within inverted commas, because when you refer to an article or chapter of a book or article, then you put that always within inverted commas, and the book name or the journal name you put in italics. Now if you look at it, the Buddhist Studies Review, you see that comes in the italics, right? That comes in italics. So 31.2 means the volume, 165, 178 is the page numbers. You may use AL, ETAL, that's a Latin word, when there are more than two authors. Now sometimes, in an article usually you have one author or two authors. But if there are more than two authors, then you can put first author's name, ඊට පස්සේ ETAL. in italics. ETAL is a Latin word, it means so on. In fact, this method is very important for scientific writings. Not like our writings in the science, sometimes one article can have 10 authors, 12 authors, 7, 8 authors is very normal. So, you can't quote when you quote all the names. So, what you do is you just quote the first name and then put the first name and then put the others under AL, ETAL. So basically, when we look at these things, these are more technical things. How are you going to present your bibliography and things like that. So out of this Chicago method and Harvard method, one method you can follow when you write in English, but when you are writing in Burmese also, although there is no like manuals like that, I don't know whether do you have any manuals like this in Burmese language when you write papers. If you don't, you can follow these methods actually. So always put the author's name first and then the book name and then the printer and the place and then the page number at the end. So within the article you can follow the short method and bibliography you can. So I think in academic writing in other than English language, if you do not have similar, these texts are called manuals of reference. So if you don't have a manual of reference in Myanmar language, maybe some of these things you can use. That's how many countries in the world do, because these things have been developed for English language and also the English authors. But when we are referring to other things, we have to be, we have to adjust these things. For example, if you are referring a Buddhist monk's name, we have to put some kind of honorific title for the monk, Ashin or Siado, whatever. But you don't want to put all the titles, Sometimes there can be so many titles for the thing. But in academic writing, you are not putting all these things. But if you are referring to the lay person, you are not putting any titles. If you are putting to a Buddhist monk, for example, now when we refer to Bhikkhu Bodhi's translations in English, even in English we say Bhikkhu Bodhi because it is his name. But we don't say Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi because that is not academic. Because for academic writing we don't want to say Venerable or Reverend or things like that. But anyway, Bhikkhu is part of his name. So we use Bhikkhu Bodhi. But then Bhikkhu Bodhi, Bhikkhu is not the first name, okay? It is the whole his name. Yeah, whole his name. But then let us imagine a situation where Siado is at the beginning. But of course, you can't put his name under S. It has to be under his real name. But the name can be mentioned as Siado. Or you can put Siado as after the name. Okay. Now, for example, we say Ashin Sunanda or somebody, and then it has to go under S. You can simply say Sunanda, Ashin. Something like that. Sunanda, Siado. Something like that. So these things you have to adjust yourself, okay? Let me try to wind up. Actually, from the morning and this afternoon, I wanted to discuss with you how to write an academic essay. Now, in the morning session, I tried to tell you how to present your material in a methodical, structured manner, and also how to give logical reasoning, how to use logical reasoning in order to support your conclusions, okay? Now in the afternoon session, we were looking at more at technical things, how to quote, how to refer to things, and also finally, how to put the reference and bibliography. But I know that this part of the discussion is not enough. So what you can do is, you can refer to my presentation again and again, that's one thing. And also you can look at internet and see, say for example, if you have a question about Chicago method or Harvard method, just type Chicago method of style. These are called method of style, STYLE, style. So you can know more about the Chicago method or the Harvard method, but just follow one method basically. At this stage, you will be fine. So in your papers, basically give a short reference within the body of the paper and then give a bibliography or reference towards the end. Difference between bibliography and reference is, in a reference list, you give the names of the books only you referred to. That's basically the difference. In the bibliography, you are putting all the relevant books inside the list. That can be much larger. But in the reference list, usually you mention the books or the papers only you referred to. Okay, so this is basically the difference. Okay, these are some of the important things when you have to know when you are writing academic papers. Because as scholars of Buddhism, you will be giving speeches and writing papers, okay, in your life. So therefore, don't think these things are not important. You might think, oh, comma, it doesn't really matter. No, even the comma, full stop mark, those things are very important. Inverted commas are important. Single commas are important, okay. So the practice these things and so that you can be a better writer, okay. So I'll wind up my discussion on this. Do you have any questions or comments or anything? I'm sure there must be things that you don't. Yes, ma'am. What is that? Your question is on what? If you write a new paper?
If we write a paper, how should we lead to the problem for the purpose of the aid or the good purpose? I cannot clear it.
Well, when you are writing a new paper, actually how to decide on what to write is an important thing, because particularly that comes from your readings. When you are a person who has read much, then you know what are the things to be important, things to be discussed. But at this level, very often you are writing something on something the topic is already given by your teacher, or in the class the teacher will say, okay, write on this. So you don't have to worry about selecting a topic because your topic has been already given. However, when you pass your Dharmacharya, BA and MA and you become a scholar, actually then you have to decide what to write. Now, in order to write a paper, you must have something to say. If you are just repeating what other people say, then of course no point writing a paper. So you must be having some new ideas, some new things, some new interpretation to give, then only you write a paper on that, okay. So that is an important thing, but that you have to decide if you are writing on your own, okay. But if you are just writing the classwork or some assignment, then your topic is already given to you. But if you have to choose a topic, then of course you have to really see whether you have something worthwhile, important thing to say. For example, if you want to write on Paticcasamuppada, you can't write that something everybody knows. In addition to something everybody knows, you must be able to say at least something new. That is why you are writing that paper, okay. So you can start saying that in this paper, I am going to write on Paticcasamuppada, but I am going to show this aspect or something, You have to specify what is going to be your contribution, to it. Okay, something like that. Yeah. Yes, sir. Say it again, sir. Huh?
We have to use all these academic sentence, academic what, academic time.
Uh-huh.
What are the academic time? What is academic
No, actually, there is no, I mean, specific thing. What I mean when I say academic paper, academic paper is basically what we are writing when we are studying some academic discipline. Now, for example, it is like this. Suppose some Buddhist society want you to write something for the ordinary people to read on Dhamma. Then you are not writing academic paper. You are just writing a Dhamma, something for the ordinary people. Okay, but academic paper is, something you write to the academic world, for the people who are studying in the universities, for the people who have got the university education. You see, but you can write many other papers like ordinary things and other papers for the ordinary men and women. I mean, those things also you have to write very correctly, there's no doubt. But then for those things, maybe you don't need to put the reference, you don't need to give the reference details and things like that. So the academic paper means you try to write a paper trying to prove some point, some important thing academically. So academia means really the place of study. Now, what we are doing here is this academy, right? Of course, the name of this place is also academy, but in addition to that, academy means, where we are studying things in a scholarly manner, okay? So in that, we will be writing papers when we have something important to say. So then paper becomes an academic paper when you follow the rules, like how to quote, how to develop paragraphs and all these things. So when you look at the academic paper, you can see that reference has been given, quotations are used correctly. So when you follow all these things, then it becomes academic paper. Okay. So ordinary people also you can write like that, but of course whether you write to them in that manner or not, that's not very important. But in the university system, for the purpose of education, we have to follow these methods. That is what is meant by academic paper. And then what I did finally, this manual of style, Chicago, Harvard, those are followed by academic writings, But these things are not to do with the content, but this how the presentation, how you present it. You remember I said about packing has to be very beautiful, like that. Like when you're writing is also, you have to present it in a methodical order. Otherwise, some scholars even don't read it. So, that's very important for us to follow this type of methods. Yes, sir. Okay. Okay. Copyright last. Okay. Answering your first question, suppose what you want to say, what you develop your own self, has been already said by somebody. That's what I think your question. Like that type of situation, actually, that is why we need to do a literature survey. Now, when we try to develop some idea, if you find it somebody has already said that, then it has been already said. So there is no point of you saying that. But you can say that in, with new evidence. Suppose that author has given certain evidence, certain arguments to prove it. But if you can give different argument, then of course you can say the same thing. Otherwise, who said what at first time is a very important thing today. Now you may know that in research culture today, when you send a research paper to publish, they always say in the publication, they received the paper on say January 10th, 2019. Now if the other paper comes January 11th, 2019, then your paper is first. They always put the date. Because there is a competition in the world, people write papers about the same thing. For example, I will give a different example. Suppose people are doing cancer research. Now somebody finds a solution for cancer. But there are so many labs in the world who are doing cancer research. So therefore it is very important for people who found it first. So if you publish your research results, say January 10th, 2019, then everything else comes after that is old. You are the first. You see? So the credit goes to the person who did it first. Now suppose when you look at the literature, you find it, what you want to say has been said 15 years ago by somebody, then it's no point you saying it again. But if then you have to say the same thing with new evidence, new argument, or something like that. Look at what? Yes, same thing. I mean, like, that's why usually we have to know about the field, about the articles who wrote. Now, suppose you are writing on particular thing, karma or whatever, you have to know who have written about it, what they have done. So you must have read these things, okay? And then only you know that what has been said and what has been not said. That's why people do what is called literature survey. You look at the past and you look at who published these things. It's very important for us to know. Otherwise, you are duplicating the same thing. I said earlier, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Wheel has been already invented, then make use of it. You don't have to reinvent it. Same thing with academic papers. Answering your second question, actually, it depends on different countries. Usually, it has to be like 50 years after the author's death. Copyright is over, 50 years. But sometimes, suppose that author's children are there, children's children are there, if they maintain the ownership, then still they own it. So, it is a very tricky thing. There are intellectual property laws in different countries. Intellectual property. Well, it naturally may be 50 years, but again there is no hard and fast law. Suppose there is a very popular book by your grandfather, then that man's son, their son's son, they maintain the copyright, so nobody else can print it. So it depends on. But there are some people after 50 years, nobody is left, nobody cares about it. So then, maybe you can do without, but even the thing is, Reverend, even if the copyright is not there, you can't plagiarize. You can't copy it. You can't say that, show it to be your, we have to be honest. But what it means is, if you want, you can translate it, you can reprint it, things like that. But I know that there are some cases where, people maintain the copyright because some books are very important. And the people maintain copyright. So after there are some cases, even 100 years old books, you have to take the copyright. So take the copyright means you have to buy it, you have to pay for it. It's like that. Yeah. Okay. I will wind up for today. So thank you very much. I expect you to follow these academic methods when you are writing academic papers. Okay, thank you very much.